Hi everybody. Okay, listen, I need your focus. I need your attention. This is going to be a long one, and it's important if you're a parent, if you're a caregiver, if you're anyone. We have a crisis, and the way around this crisis is to start talking about it, is to start communicating, is to start educating. Drug Strategy Peterborough, in combination right now, we're in PARN in Peterborough, Ontario. And I'm joined with Chris from PARN, and I'm joined with Kelly Wheaton. Kelly is raw. She is in very early stages of grief. Kelly, unfortunately, is one of the major victims of the crisis that we're dealing with, and lost her son Joey to a fentanyl overdose just 6-7 weeks ago?
December 21st.
December 21st, 2017. I'm going to ask you when Joey started using fentanyl.
About 11 years ago. He was 18. 10 years ago, he was 18.
Do you know what kind or what started it or how it happened?
I don't exactly know how he got to fentanyl. I don't know where that came from. That was completely out of the blue, but Oxy, it was friends. And then it progressed from just taking pills to snorting the pills, crushing them and snorting them, and moving on to trying things like cocaine, which is a completely different high, and he hated that. It wasn't the same thing. It brought him up, and he didn't want a heightened sense of feeling. He wanted to block what he was feeling, and I don't know how, but he moved on to fentanyl. It was the patches, and he smoked them.
When did you find out?
I found out about 5 years ago when he was brought to my door, sick, dope sick. He was going through withdrawals. So I called the ambulance because I had no clue what to do with that. And we went to ER and stayed there for the night while they watched him, and basically just left us alone in the room. And I just watched him convulse and scream and cry and beg me to kill him.
We could talk for hours because there's so much more in the healthcare system, and we are in a crisis, and we understand that. We're not going to fix it all in this conversation. Unfortunately, it's messy and it's complicated, and things could have been done differently, and hopefully people will learn from Joey what needs to be improved and what we need to do better. But what I want people to know about Joey, and what you are so passionate about, Kelly, is that addiction is not, it's not a kid that comes from a bad home.
They're not mumbling behind the post office, bashing their heads against walls. These are daughters, sons, brothers, sisters, mothers, and fathers who are loved and love. They come from happy homes, they come from unhappy homes. But they've all come from somebody and somewhere down the line that got lost. And people look at somebody with a drug addiction as just being a junkie or an addict, or just, move them aside a bit. They don't come first. They're not as important because they're broken. They have a drug addiction. They choose that. Well, they don't. That's the problem. They don't choose to be an addict. They made a mistake. Joey made a mistake. Made a bad choice. Very bad choices. That doesn't turn him into a bad person. But it did take his life.
Why did you want to do this interview?
Because I don't want to see another kid stolen. It doesn't have to happen. No other mother needs to be sitting here saying, what if?
Did you have conversations about fentanyl, about
I
drug
never heard of
use?
fentanyl until he was at my door going through withdrawals. I'd never heard of it.
What is fentanyl?
Fentanyl is a high-strength opiate that is prescribed as a pain reliever. Again, opiates also tend to produce euphoria, which leads to their, again, recreational use. As far as opiates are concerned, so opiates as a whole are a classification of drugs that are depressants, so that means that they slow things down. Again, most opiates are used for pain relief.
What is carfentanil?
So carfentanil is an analog or a variation of fentanyl that was originally used as an elephant tranquilizer. So again, an incredibly potent opiate. One of the biggest concerns, I think, with the crisis that we find ourselves in right now is that when, especially you're procuring your substances from a non-medical source, there's no quality control, right? And so a lot of the times people using those drugs, or even the people selling those drugs, don't actually know what the content of that drug is. And so people can end up inadvertently taking a substance thinking that it was something else when, again, their body is not at a place where it can tolerate that intensity of a drug.
Joey is a progression story, you know. He tried it, he became addicted. But there's so many other kids out there that will be in a situation, and, you know, whether you're drunk or whether it's peer pressure or whatever it is, and sure, just try it.
That's all it takes is one try and it can kill you. Just one try of this stuff and you could die. It's just that simple. Especially now. You don't know what you're getting. And you don't know what it's being mixed into.
The conversations at the dinner table are, don't do drugs. And that's the extent of it, because the parents are terrified. They're hearing these statistics of overdoses. They're hearing these statistics of fentanyl and carfentanil and how deadly it is. How do we talk to our kids about drugs, and in particular, these lethal drugs?
I think it's important to recognize that, the validity of having those fears as a parent, for sure. But what we want to do is ensure that we're not sort of buying into the sort of fear-mongering and hysteria. We need to, I think, recognize that substance use is a normal part of human behavior that we all engage in some way, shape, or form, regardless of what our substance of choice is, and maybe that's sugar, and maybe that's something else. Addiction is so much more than chemical hooks, and so I think the most important thing that we can do as parents, but not just as parents, as friends and loved ones, as community members, is again, create safe spaces as best we can to have, again, open and honest conversations with the people in our lives about the things that are going on, because we tend to bury those things. And again, when we bury them, that doesn't mean that they've disappeared or gone away anywhere. They're still there. They're just sort of festering. Maybe it's, struggles with, depression or anxiety or any number of other things. And again, making sure that we keep those lines of communication open and having those real conversations.
There's a reason we're talking about this. Yes, we want education. Education equals awareness equals change. It's like my mantra. But we can all help. We can all do something, whether you're a mom, whether you have a kid, whether you have a son who's addicted, whether you don't have a son who's addicted, whether you have no children, whether you have some children. We as a society can all do something.
When we encounter somebody in our day-to-day lives and we start to, have assumptions and jump to conclusions about that individual, I think one of the most important things that we can do is step back and say, where are these assumptions coming from? And is this actually based in any sort of a reality? Do I have any valid reason to think this is true? Because I don't actually know that person's story. And as we've been talking about, there's so much more beneath the surface than what we see at any given moment. And so it's something that I've really been trying to practice myself and encouraging others is that, again, when I encounter someone in my life and I start to, again, jump to conclusions and make assumptions about that person and I don't know that person's story, it's taking a time to step back and reflecting on where did that thought come from? Why am I thinking that? Do I have any, again, firsthand experience to back that up? Do I have any data that I can point to? Does that fit within my own value system? And if I can't answer a resounding yes to all three of those questions, those are the times that I need to ask more questions and seek out more information. When you look at the statistics, there is no stereotypical substance user. That doesn't exist. That's a fiction that's been perpetuated by film. And I've been doing this work for around 10 years and I still have that stereotypical image that pops into my mind, but it's not based in reality. When you look at the data, as we've talked about, this is something that can impact absolutely anybody in the community. There is no one way that this looks. And so when we really practice that awareness, I think we can start to break down some of those stigmatizing barriers that are preventing people who want to receive help from getting help.
I love some of these stats on here. And it's the majority of people who use substances will not end up being dependent on them. It's the same addiction process that underlies behavioral, for example, shopping and fentanyl. Who would even link those two things together? And it's a big, messy, complicated thing, but if we as a society all embrace this, because you know what, people won't, we tell you to talk, we tell you Belle's figured this out ages ago, let's talk, but people won't talk if they don't feel safe to talk. People won't talk if they feel judged. People won't share if they're scared. So we need to be a lot more caring as a society.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, another practical step we can talk about is in the language that we use. Using terms like addict or alcoholic or crackhead is really reductionist. Again, Joey, every individual is so much more than this one thing that they're engaging in. So much more than that, right? You think about the beauty and nuance of a human life and what one activity that you participate in can possibly define you as a whole, right? That's absurd. So I think even just being aware of the language that we use and how we can inadvertently end up contributing towards those stigmatizing attitudes, right? Because when I call somebody an addict or a junkie, I might not even be trying to be malicious, but what I'm doing is I'm rewiring the way that my brain perceives that person. I'm rewiring the brains of the people who hear me using that language, and I'm rewiring the brain of that individual. At PARN, we have a number of folks who, this is not an uncommon tale, where just like they hear being called a crackhead time and time again, and start to see themselves as that, right? And then like all of a sudden that's my identity. My identity is wholly wrapped up in this one thing, but it's a lie that people are being told.
If you're told something enough times, you're gonna believe it.
Exactly.
If you don't believe you're good enough, why would you be good enough? Mm-hmm. We talked on the phone quite a bit yesterday, Kelly and I, about this, and you know, you talked about the non-addict Joey and what a sweet, sweet boy he was, and what the drugs did to him.
He was generous and caring, and he genuinely cared about other people and did everything he could to make you happy. He just wanted people to be happy, right?
Yeah,
he was a
absolutely.
good kid with a huge heart and a really deep soul. Mm-hmm. He was a great kid. And I really miss him.
Thank you. I know this was really hard for you to do.